In today's video, I'll be breaking down the exact way that I help New Jersey real estate investors avoid losing their deals in attorney review. Before we get into how I help New Jersey real estate investors avoid losing their deals in attorney review, there's two very important things that we have to go over. Number one, this simple and straightforward key contract law principle that's acting against you and putting your deals at risk in attorney review. And number two, the external forces that are just waiting outside of your deal for your deal to become vulnerable so that they can just swoop in and take the deal from you. Oh, don't you know it? Your competition. We'll get right into that soon. And once we go over those two things, the third thing that we'll discuss in this video is how I help my clients avoid losing their deals in attorney review while keeping these two very important things in mind. All right, so we're going to dive right into that contract law principle that is making your deals vulnerable. So, offer and acceptance rules. When you make an offer, what that really is you sending your contract over, hopefully with your signature on it. You've probably already made a verbal offer and the seller said they accept your price. And then you say, okay, I'll send you a contract. That contract is really the formal offer in writing. If the seller receives that and they sign it, they've now accepted the offer. Now you have a binding contract. The next step that most people go through in New Jersey is they send this contract to their attorney to begin attorney review. It's kind of just the way that things work normally. But when you're an investor, you really want to avoid getting into this stage of the transaction because attorney review creates a vulnerability. And the reason why is because of how contract law works. So let's say your attorney gets the contract and you say, please make these changes, and your attorney has their changes they want to make, and they send the changes out in a letter to the seller's attorney, or they give them to you to give to the seller. When you do that, what you are doing is you are sending a new offer. You're counter offering, you're making new terms, and the seller then has to accept them. But by sending those new terms over, you're voiding your other binding contract that you had. So you're no longer under a binding agreement anymore. You are now vulnerable again. And when we talk about the next factor that's making your deal vulnerable in part 2 of this video, the external forces, you already know that this is a possibility, but you'll see how you're creating the exposure to the risk. So you just need to understand that when you begin attorney review, you're no longer in a binding agreement with the seller anymore. And that is creating that vulnerability. So now let's talk about how that vulnerability can be taken advantage of in part 2. All right, so now we're going to get into number 2, which are the external forces that are at play, just lurking, waiting to dive into your vulnerable deal. So when you're an investor, you are marketing yourself to property owners who are probably, and you know this, receiving phone calls, receiving mailings, receiving postcards, maybe even being texted by other investors. Because let's face it, with the way data works these days, it's very likely that other investors have that property on their list. And so you may even call a seller and they may tell you, I've already received calls from 10 people. Please leave me alone, right? So your deal is vulnerable and you know about these external forces. So there's always this risk that right after you go under contract, the seller may get a call from another buyer who's just as serious as you are, who perhaps wants to offer them more money. If you go into attorney review and you are no longer in a binding contract, and especially if the seller has a lawyer and they get a better offer, your deal is in such risk. I mean, it is outside of your hands at that point. The seller can just move on. They can say they're no longer interested and that they're canceling and they have no liability to you. Okay, so in my practice, as I've been helping investors for many, many years, I noticed that this vulnerability was being created and that it was so much better for my investor clients if I could empower them with contracts that they know that they can utilize and they can send over to the seller and not have to make any changes. There's only so much control you have in a real estate transaction. You can only control your side of the deal. So the seller may have a lawyer who wants to make changes to the contract, but you do want to try and avoid that risk from happening as much as possible. So, what I have done over the years is developed investor templates where I have drafted these contracts that can be utilized by investors and customized by the investors to be a solid contract that they no longer have changes to make to. So, if you are working with a template and you kind of just fill out the blanks, but you have these provisions that you've never read before, they're there because you maybe downloaded the template. So, what I do is I work with my investor clients to understand the terms of the contract and edit them so that they are for New Jersey specifically. And then I teach them where they can customize those terms and how and why they would want to do that. The idea is that they're getting as much education as possible as to how to fill out that contract template so that they don't need me because they may be making an offer at like 10 p.m. and then they don't need me to make any changes during attorney review. Another thing that's very important is that the investor is making sure that everything is in that document that needs to be in there that they know they're going to need to rely on. So if you have contingencies, if you have inspections that you still need to do, if you have some diligence that you need to do, you've already discussed with the seller so that everyone's expectations are managed and you have a full plan in place on how to move that transaction from contract to closing. And if there's any risk for you to not do so, that you're prepared and you're planned for it. It's very important that you get your grip around everything that you could expect and that you can find after doing some diligence, and you factor that into your discussions and your contract with the seller. So, we talked about three different things, two important things that make your deal vulnerable, and then three, how to avoid that vulnerability in attorney review. Hopefully, this video was helpful. Like, subscribe, comment. I'm going to be posting 3 new videos next week. So, if there's anything that you'd like to hear about in the realm of New Jersey real estate, whether you're a buyer, a seller, an investor, or even if you're a real estate agent who's watching this, please feel free to put comments below with any topics that you'd like to see discussed. And next week, I'll be hosting my first live stream. I will maybe pop in and post when the live stream will be so that you can plan in advance. All right. Thank you so much. And I look forward to catching you next week.